Revolutionary talk for revolutionary times. Promoting peace, liberty, and prosperity around the clock. LibertyTalk.fm.
Welcome to Living the Solution with Dr. Elena George. Today I have one of my favorite guests on, somebody who's a friend of the show and a friend to humanity, quite frankly. We're going to speak with Miss Lynne Taylor. She's also known as the Common Core Diva, and you can reach her on her website, commoncorediva.com. Every time I go there, I learn just a multitude of things. And, I think we're hitting a little bit of information overload, but I don't think people should see it that way. I think it should be seen as you don't know what you don't know. You can't make informed decisions. You can't protect yourself and your family unless you're willing to expose yourself to this. This is about knowledge. It's not anything else. And I'm dismayed that people are living in an environment where fear is driving everything. And I think people are working themselves out of it. But to this point, it's been, if I don't know, then I can't get hurt. And somebody really cares about me, and I should just let others who know more take the lead. I think we're learning from this COVID situation that is not how you need to handle this throughout our society. I don't care if you're a child, an adult, you must take responsibility for your actions, your body, your choices, because somebody else will. And I think we're learning that they don't have your best interests at heart. Every time I have Lynne on the show, I learn a great deal about our education system. And I remember, I love being a student. I'm sure you did too, Lynne. It's so much power in our education system. Thank God I grew up in a environment where I was an individual. I was expected to achieve. There was no excuses. And if I needed help, I could go to my teachers and get that. And it was working with me. I don't think that's the case now. And we talked on the show in the past about Common Core curriculum. And I want to revisit that again because it seems like that is the foundation and the outgrowth of everything that's coming down the pipe. I don't even think people even have a clue, but they will by the end of the show, that we need to take our power back. And it's to protect our children more than anything else. So thank you, Lynne, for coming on the show. I just love having you as a guest.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Elena. And it's always a joy to be with you. And I hope you are doing well. I hope Memorial Day weekend went fine for you.
It did.
And if anyone is interested about my coverage on COVID and how this connects into education, if you'll go to my blog, that's commoncorediva.com, and type in COVID in the search bars, you're going to come up with all kinds of information. You can also find some of my interviews on my website. You can also find some of the information on the Sons of Liberty Media, and that's where you can find out interviews about COVID and education as well. But you're absolutely right. The Common Core machine knew that they had to get everyone's attitudes, values, and beliefs in just the right position to be able to be as manipulative as we're seeing, to be able to take all kinds of lies and pass them off as supposedly researched facts. And, why would we need to question what's going on when we see the pattern of Common Core? Look what it did to math. It took it from an absolutely proven factual base that 2 + 2 is 4 to now 2 + 2 is anything that I can justifiably say that I believe it is. We cannot build a society on false information. We cannot have our nation run in a spirit of fear. Now, here's the thing that really bothers me. So many people are supposedly waking up, but had they been awake from the get-go, this would not have happened. If they had just said no, if they had just said, show me where this is. Don't just tell me. Don't just get someone who was in there and was key in the HIV research and screwed that up and killed millions of people,
Mm-hmm.
But people forget their history, and this is part of it.
It absolutely is part of it. And it doesn't, I'm going to be honest, it doesn't excuse us because we, abrogated our duties to protect ourselves and to make conscious decisions. You have to have personal responsibility. I think the doctors who are involved with this are going to have to take personal responsibility, as are the parents, as are the patients who just stuck their arm out and said, help me, because I'm afraid, and everything will go back to normal. And, I figured that we would start making some turns in this direction when it's been coming out, daily, that it's not what it was cracked up to be. It doesn't stop you from getting, for example, with the vaccine, doesn't stop you from getting ill, doesn't stop you from being able to transmit it. That doesn't stop you from, uh, it causes issues. And
Right.
I think it comes down to education, right? We're looking at people going along with, oh, something happened to someone within hours of getting an experimental treatment, and it's all coincidence. How many coincidences can we possibly have? And nobody stands up at some point and says, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. You keep telling us this doesn't make critical thinking, doesn't make sense. But it seems like people are still, I don't get it. And is it really from the education that we're seeing that this has been educated out of us, critical thinking?
Well, absolutely, in some ways, but we need to go back into history. And there is a wonderful book out there that I want everyone to find if you can. And I found it on the internet, and it's not that expensive of a book, but it was written back in 1928, Dr. Elena, and it's titled Propaganda, and it's by a man who was called Edward Bernays, and that's Bernays. Now, he was key in the U.S. federal government in making propaganda a political tool to be used against us. And this particular book lays out how it gets done and what its goal is. And its goal is to take the influence of the few and mass indoctrinate many so that they will willingly follow. Now, this was back in 1928, my dear, and here we are in 2021, and we're seeing this play out.
Absolutely. And we're also seeing that it's legal. Under the administration before last, wasn't it made legal for the government to foist propaganda on the citizens of this country?
Oh, it's been going for years. But yes, the last administration, this administration, in this particular book, Bernays even tells you that he was a Roosevelt Kennedy liberal, but he also was responsible for engineering public relations in all kinds of areas. Now, one of his main claims to fame is that he was propelled into fame in the late 20s, and that was by waging a campaign that it was okay for women to smoke even when they were pregnant.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, we're seeing that now, aren't we? I mean, this is the first time. There's nothing new under the sun, is it? And let's use that corollary.
Not.
I'm going to give an example and tie it to what's being said about the inoculation now. We were taught that pregnant women shouldn't have anything, that's artificial medication. Everything has to be vetted before it can be put into their system if they're pregnant. Now we're being told that pregnant women should take this inoculation. No science behind it, mind you. And again, it's this propaganda. Things that were not right years ago are now okay. And nobody questions it. No testing, no vetting. It's just because I say so. It goes down to, I'm just seeing this like a template. I am what I say I am, therefore it is.
Well, because you have all these talking heads who are pretending to be in charge when they have no constitutional authority to do so, and you get them saying it long enough and loud enough and scary enough, you're going to do exactly what we've seen, and that is take the conscious and intelligent manipulation of organized habits and opinions of the masses, because they have to be crafted to fit this democratic society. Now, if you'll remember, we are a constitutional republic. It's only through the UN that we are deemed a democratic society, and everything that the UN does and has played into this, Dr. Elena, is for the total restructure of America from a constitutional republic into a member state democratic society, because that's how worldliness works.
Let's take our first break, because that is such, I don't know, it's hard to say what that is, but it's not true. On that note, let's take our first break. You're living in the solution. Welcome back to Living the Solution. We're speaking with Miss Lynne Taylor. And before the break, you were talking about the UN and democracy. That is really a loaded word, because democracy in their mind doesn't mean the same thing as it does for what we believe democracy is. It seems to be more
Right.
top-down, bureaucratic, totalitarian, and anybody who gets in the way of that machine is going to be steamrolled. And let's go back to education, because we talk on the show, it hasn't been a lot, but there's been shows about, I guess, gender identity and the movement towards social engineering. And I don't see it as an organic thing. This seems to be part of another whole to break us apart, to subdivide us. And again, it comes down to, you are what I say. Well, I am what I say I am, and you're supposed to just go along with it, no matter how ridiculous it is. Forget about facts. I'm so done with follow the science, because it's actually the opposite. Every time they say that, your hair should stand up on the back of your neck, because it is not science. There are two genders, which is okay. Right? There is.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's a contrived agenda. Again, if you look at those Sustainable Development Goals, Dr. Elena, of the 17, that sort of thing comes in, I think it is under education, gender equality, and it seems to me there's, the decent work for all, that's number 8. So that's 3, 4, and 8 out of 17 goals. Now, if you look at the rest of the 17 goals, you're going to see peace and harmony. You're going to see, all this other kind of stuff that plays into it. So every one of those has been woven into our education, and it's for the purpose of breeding social justice, which we have talked about. But it's not, and see, here's the thing. True social justice is you acting on your own for what you believe is worth standing up for and fighting for. It is not this mass movement that you're just following someone else's anger or their, misinformation. That's where the difference is. And I wanted to point out from this particular book, Bernays did discuss propaganda in education. And here's what he said. Education is not securing its proper share of public interest. And he goes on to tell you throughout this part of the book that education has been, it's got a, let's see here. The real value of education is a social force, and it's not receiving the kind of attention that it has the right to expect in a democracy. Okay, so he goes on to tell us that in the field of education, we find what we found in politics and other fields, that the evolution of the practitioner of the profession, in other words, a teacher, has not kept pace with the social evolution around him. And they're out of gear with instruments for the dissemination of ideas which modern society has developed. So in other words, he's saying here that part of the propaganda in education is because the teachers are not teaching what the present moment or the flavor of the month is. Now, here's the rub. Teachers lost the ability to teach what they wanted to teach to their students when Common Core came in, because it dictated what they would teach and what they wouldn't teach. And there are many teachers who don't want to teach any of the stuff that is coming down the pipe. They really don't, but they're being told they have to.
It sounds a lot like the healthcare profession as well, where people are getting along because they're of sanctions. They'll lose their job. They will be ostracized. Whatever it is, they won't be able to pursue what God put them on this earth to pursue. But did the COVID social distancing and home schooling enable this? Did it make it more powerful and make it move faster towards this one size fits all system?
I think in some ways the answer is yes, and I think in other ways it's no, because had people been paying attention when the warnings first started coming out about, hey, this is coming after us. And, people have been sounding the alarm for years. I mean, this is not anything new. They've been sounding the alarm against tyranny for years, especially through education. And so many people have greeted me and others like myself who have been trying to warn with, it's not impacting me now, therefore I don't need to mess with it. I'm going to go on with my happy little life. And you know what? If it happens, I'll deal with it then. You cannot be a prepared parent if you wait until the crap hits the fan. It's too late then.
I would agree with that. And I'll use an example that I just read a couple of days ago about a school system in Maryland who's just going to pass every child who failed during this homeschooling year. That does not help the child. It actually, I can't imagine from an emotional standpoint what they must feel by just being pushed along. What happens in the next school year? Do they ever catch up? And of course, it's always race-based, right? So it's only the Black students who have this happen to them. It's the opposite. Every time we talk about social justice and helping a specific group, that group seems to end up behind the 8 ball. And anybody who speaks up gets smacked down as a racist and wanting everything to, go back to Jim Crow. And we're moving that way in a weird way.
Mm-hmm. Right. But here's the thing. It won't be, I don't think, on skin color. It's going to be, did you take the jab or did you not? That's where the segregation is going to come in. And as far as true homeschooling, what happened this last year for those who just, were doing public school at home, that is not true homeschooling. And the state should not be claiming that it's homeschooling. Yes, you were at home, but you were carrying on your public school education through home. Now, the danger in passing any student for any reason when they're failing is letting them fall through the cracks. And I can tell you from personal experience, I have had parents call me and go, this school system graduated my child, yet my child cannot read. What do I do? Because they're supposed to be ready for the world, and they're not ready for the world. Well, okay, if you knew that your child could not read before graduation, why did you wait until after graduation to start pointing fingers at the school system?
Well,
Again, we've got parents who don't want to do their job.
I can't argue that. I think it comes down to, again, responsibility for your child. It's a loaded question. How could you not know that your child can't read or they're illiterate? I mean, does that mean that there's two separate lives going on in a household where the parent is pursuing theirs and the child is doing whatever they want to do? That just doesn't compute to me. That's not how I grew up. I don't know anybody in my circle of friends who had that. How do we move from parents overseeing and being involved to this?
I think it has to do with the false narrative that economy is more important than people. And see, that's one of the things about the Common Core machine. This is one of the things about COVID that we've seen is that money has been thrown at the problem, and it's not fixing the problem, because when you throw money at education, when you throw money at healthcare, it doesn't do anything but breed more compliance. It does not solve the situation. It can't, because money is a tactical thing, and people need help that is one-on-one or human-based, not financially based. But again, this is why we're seeing such a demise, because what has happened for all these years? Oh, well, you know what? If you want to go live in a nice, big, fancy house, you have to have X number of jobs, you have to have X number of dollars, and, you have to have 3.5 kids, which I never figured out how they got 3.5, because you can't have half a child. So, the whole thing of it has been this false narrative that the American dream is worth going into massive debt, but it's also worth seeing your family broken apart, which is another kingpin in this whole plan. It's to divide families, not bring them together.
Well, on a big scale, you spoke about the global system, whether that's the economy or governmental system. Were we real? I mean, I always had the feeling from a health perspective, we were an outlier. that we had to lower our standards in healthcare in order to fit into the global healthcare system with universal healthcare, et cetera. Was that
Right.
the same in education? I mean, I know that people want to come here for higher education. This is the Mecca for, well, at least it was.
It was.
But
It's
I
not
don't know about
anymore,
now.
but
Yeah.
precisely. Yeah, you had to take us as a first world country, and you had to bring us down to third world standards to be able to be that good member state. But that's been the plan. See, the number one sustainable development goal, Dr. Elena, is no poverty. And when people hear that, they think, oh, we're all going to be rich. But what they don't realize, and the World Economic Forum has recently come out and said and backed this particular thought up, and that thought is, no, you're not going to be, not everyone's going to be rich. Everyone's going to be governed and controlled. And here's how that plays into this recent statement by the World Economic Forum. They came out and said, by the year 2030, you will own nothing. You will have no money. You will have no place to live. You will have no food, and you're going to be happy about it. Now, how are we going to be happy about it? Because we're going to have idiot groups like the UN taking care of us.
They're taking care of us with sustainable income. Who's living on $1,000? What is it, a month? Whatever it was. You can't.
Yeah, it was the universal basic income.
That's it. I mean, well, it's not sustainable. I mean, you can't do anything. You're just stuck in your 400 square foot house with no lights, not taking baths because you got to save water. I mean, the people you're not living in Beverly Hills here, folks. You are living subsistence living without a job, probably because it's going to be robots doing everything. Who in their right mind wants to live in a system like that? But then you're talking before we took the break about propaganda. So you have this overview, this fake Hollywood overlay of how awesome everything is. People on social media with their whatever they're doing on TikTok, etc. I mean, talk about bread and circuses. How can somebody turn off their? You're living in a quarantine situation, but you're living through somebody who is completely removed from your state of being. The human mind is amazing that you can actually just live in that space and hate on people who are trying to be free and telling you or giving you the information so that you can wake up and make some changes in your life. And you really will take them out. I mean, this is amazing. It's like a big psych experiment. It's like Stanford experiment.
Well, right. And it precisely is. And again, we're going to have to look to our government because they have been using these kind of military style PSYOP operations on us for decades. And this was part of the plan to reshape America. And remember, this plan is over 100 years old. So this is not anything that's been in our lifetime, but it's been that progressive techno-fascism move to reshape our nation completely so that, by the time the changes are here, we're going to be okay with them. But what we have time to still do is, and we're seeing this happen with some of the states who are saying, okay, well, we're going to listen and masks are not all that important, that sort of thing. It's going to take people saying, you know what, this is junk. We don't have to do it anyway. They need to remember this violates all kinds of civil rights. This violates all kinds of constitutional rights. This violates so many God-given ethics and morals because, our government was never supposed to be so big as to be a tyrant. And it hasn't become a tyranny under one administration. It's been a long, slow process to where we are now in what's known as an open-air prison. We are so imprisoned by our government, but yet we have this notion somehow that we're still free. But if you look at everything the government sanctions, we have almost no freedom. And this COVID was one of the last things to break us.
On that note, let's take our second break and think about that. You're living in the solution. Welcome back to Living the Solution. We're speaking with Miss Lynne Taylor. Before the break, you made a very poignant argument for humanity. And I think it all came down to fear. That's what allowed us to acquiesce, and it's nothing. I don't think in the history of humanity, I don't think anything has been this overarching, hitting every country in the world the same way. And there has to be a bigger picture than we're being told for everybody to react the same way. And as the information starts to unfold about how it's being used as a mechanism to bring in these control levers that we just discussed, we still have time. There's still time to withdraw your consent from this. And, we're talking about education today. And you mentioned briefly, you talked about the movement towards breaking the family and breaking roles of gender, let's face it. And there's something now that's come online, which I don't know if parents even know about, something called the National Sex Ed Skills Standards for kindergarten through 12th grade. Is this another thing that's designed to literally break the back of society? Tell us about it.
Yes, absolutely. Well, these particular standards have been around for a few years, Dr. Elena, but it's the fact of the more recent pushes by some of the UN-related groups that are saying, we need to overstimulate little people's minds in this particular area. And one of the things that we know is that too much too soon does not educate, it harms. And all you have to do is look at Dr. Kinsey's supposed research. Now, there was another junk scientist, and his work was taken as the gospel and has totally reshaped so much of America, not only from sex and sexuality, but from the penal code system that we have in our prison system and our legal system. It was because of his junk science for supposed, sexuality, that he was able to work with Rockefeller and influence Congress to weaken penal codes for rapists, sodomites, and pedophiles.
And this whole thing, it's not just education, it pervades the system. I'm looking on your website. I mean, you're talking about medicine, about it's outside of the school system as well. So it seems like it's comprehensive. You never get to escape it, whether you're a parent looking to do that or not. Is that true?
And that's what these supposed standards are. They're also known as CSE, or Comprehensive Sexuality Education. And it's porn in schools is what it is. But now we have, and I've not had time to read it, so I think our next show we need to really open this little can of worms, and that is that I believe it's UNICEF has published a report that said that parents need to ease up because porn's not always bad for children.
Yeah.
I could not disagree more, because again, too much too soon, especially when your brain is not geared for that sort of activity yet. It's very, very harmful. And again, this goes back to not just America, but this is everywhere. And one of the things that we're seeing that schools are doing is they're taking these standards and they're not just using it in, remember we had health class and we talked about biology. Well, that's pretty much where it needed to end. But these take it into, don't forget, there's, it says sex skills. So that's what they're teaching is skills. So you have little people who are learning how to put condoms on bananas. You have little people who are learning that there are other fruits that can mimic other body parts as well and how to use them. And so this is a very twisted agenda. But let me try and tie this back in with the COVID. Okay, because what we're seeing happen with this particular experimental vaccine, and they are experimental, they've not been tested short-term or long-term, and they're saying to the children, okay, we're going to come in and we're going to open up in some states, and we're going to say 12 and up can now get it. Well, you have little people and young people who are saying, okay, they're showing up at school, and because they've shown up, they can go get the vaccine without mom and dad knowing it. Now, in a state like Tennessee, they say they really would like you as a parent to give your consent, but they don't advertise, hey, parents, we need you to give us your consent. They just, hey, the kid comes up, says, hey, I want a vaccine, and boom, they've got it. Things are in the work now to start on 2-year-olds. So what we're going to see is not only is this going to alter their bodies, it's going to mess with their hormones. It's going to mess with puberty. It's going to do all sorts of things that we don't know about yet. Teens are already starting to report heart problems and heart attacks.
And strokes as well. And there's no liability. That's what people really do need to remember. If the school is a source or site of getting this shot, they can't be sued, can they?
No, because we had our government sit there and change the legislation and the laws that any medical injury that falls under something like this totally just cannot happen. But there is one thing that we can do, and we would have to personally sue each person in our school district who does this, because the reason why the schools are being used as medical hubs, and we've talked about this before, is because in the Every Student Succeeds Act, when they changed some of the school funding, it caused a federally recognized quasi-hospital label to be stuck on that school, not for just the school students, but for the entire community. And what are we seeing? But schools and churches are opening up for come get your vaccination here. That was planned through the Every Student Succeeds Act, not just for health care, but for family manipulation. Hey, mom and dad, are you raising your kids right? Well, come down to the government-run center and we'll show you how to do it, because after all, you can't do it. Hey, you don't have enough money to pay for a shot. Come on down to the school and we'll take care of your health care needs. Now, this goes also into mental health, which again goes after the values, attitudes, and beliefs. So all these roots, Dr. Elena, that have seemed to be separate have now become intertwined over this one supposed just horrible disaster.
Oh, wow. It's just perfect synchronicity, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is.
Man, I mean, just think about this extrapolating out. Your child ends up in a mental health issue. I'm sure that's going to follow them through their life. Nothing is private. HIPAA is not designed for health privacy. It's about who gets it and how they get it and what form they get it. But they're getting it. And imagine it going to all alphabet agencies, and you want to join the service, or you want to become a police officer, or you want to buy a legal weapon. You're not going to be able to do it based on this, because it's a grid, isn't it?
Well, and that's the point. It's to rack and stack and track you is exactly what it is. But let me back up for just a second, because I did say there was something we could do, and it would mean that we would need to sue every person on the school board or every person who was in the government. And that is the Civil Rights Act of 1981, Section 1983. Now, the American Policy Center has published this. It is all about your civil actions for deprivation of your rights. Now, while this can be used, especially in property disputes, this particular section, Dr. Elena, is so broad that it can be used as recourse for that family who wants to try to go after the school board for giving the kid the vaccination. Okay? And here's how I know that. Cornell Law School took this particular section, and here's their summary. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protections of laws. Now, this is where we need to stop for just a second, because so many of these things that we're seeing are not laws, they're mandates, and mandates are not laws. Mandates are absolutely unconstitutional and illegal. So if someone has told you that, hey, the state of Georgia has mandated that children 12 and up get this, mandates are not laws. If they try to pass it off as a law, you need to be finding out, okay, what's the statute number? Where's the section? Where's the clause? If not, use that particular section of the Civil Rights Act of 1981, Section 1983, and it gives you the absolute solid protection to go after anyone who's impeding any of your rights, including your right to decide what I want to do.
So again, it comes down to knowledge, because if you know what your rights are, they really thrive on people not knowing this and just saying, well, they say it must be true. That's how they're getting away with this stuff. That I've seen videos where people ask whoever's trying to coerce them into something to show them, cite the legislation, cite the law or the rule, and they can't do it, and they just give up and leave the person alone. So they know once you stand up for your rights, they actually stand down. They try to bully us into acquiescing, but that's really all this is. It seems like a huge bluff. And we have 30 seconds, so I want you to answer that for me on the other side of the break. So let's take our last break. You're living in the solution. Welcome back to Living in Solution. We're speaking with Miss Lynne Taylor. CommonCoreDiva.com is her website. You also have another podcast, don't you, Lynne?
I do, yes. I have, every week I'm on Sons of Liberty Media. That's the morning show, and we talk nothing but education. I'm also on, I'm on, I think it's BitChute and Rumble under the Liberty Bells, and that's where you can find me.
Well, people do need to find you because you've done so much work that it's a shortcut to getting up to speed on what we need to do to take our power back. We're in a very precarious situation where we've been bullied and bluffed into the position that we find ourselves in. But they all know, people who are trying to run this scam on us, know that they don't have a leg to stand on. And what you just described, it takes the will and the mindset to want to help yourself. We have to get into that. Stop waiting for somebody to do it for you. You have to do it. Nobody cares more about you than you, right? And God.
Right. And no one loves your children more than you do.
No.
And God, he loves them more. As funny as that may sound, he loves them more. He blessed you with them. You are their caretakers. And, that school system does not love your child near as much as you do. They love the money your child represents.
And that's a really good point. Let's talk about that for a second, because the people who always talk about social justice and wanting everybody to be equal and be better are the ones standing in the way of children who are at the back end of this system getting a leg up. People who want to put their children in homeschooling or charter schools. I know we talked about charter schools and they have their issues, but compared to the public school system, if you have a good one, aren't you in a better situation?
No, because everything aligns to the Common Core. And we're seeing that the comprehensive sexuality education is showing up in private schools. Like some of the charter schools, we see them showing up in even some of the faith-based schools. We see it showing up in our libraries, our museums. We even have churches that will help hold this kind of stuff. And so every student succeeds on page 17. And I know we've talked about this before, Dr. Elena. But it says all education must be aligned to the same post-secondary readiness standards as laid out by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. That has nothing to do with reading, writing, spelling. It doesn't have anything to do with math. It doesn't have anything to do with science. It's all saying workforce-based, because that's also part of the shift. You look at the present state that COVID has put everything in. Well, the government should have never gone in and told businesses they needed to close down, because that skewed the economy. those businesses will probably not be back. We're now seeing that because of the government dole-outs, that people are not going back to work. So I've got a gas station just down the street. It's a little convenience store and gas station because no one's coming to work. They've had to shut part of the store down, and the only way you can get gas is if you have a credit card. So this, again, is all playing into the thing of reshaping where we live, how we work, where we work. And again, the supposed education is supposed to make us ready. Well, it's making us ready for one thing, and that's to be workforce ready, because that's why it said all education. So all education doesn't mean just public school like so many people assume. It means homeschool, private school, parochial school, hybrid schooling, charter schools, magnet schools. Let's see, even the ones that are international baccalaureate, those AP courses. Now, the wiki stick it on the international baccalaureate is those are totally UN. Those are little UN hubs in your community.
Wow. So my second part of my question then is, how do they get this much power? The parochial schools, the private schools, they're not getting money like the public schools from people paying their property taxes. Why are they going along with this? Aren't they their own funding fiefdom? Well, I know the colleges get a lot of government money, but does that still roll down to the smaller schools, the secondary schools too?
Yeah. Some of the private and parochials do receive some type of federal funding. Others, the reason they're aligning with it is because of all those high stake assessments. Remember, Gates told us the assessments will drive the curriculum. Now, as much as I despise that man, he was dead on right when he said that, because he knew that's what needed to happen, because he was one of the ones in on this.
He's
so
everywhere.
Yes, your assessments are driving the curriculum. So, in order to be, as the world sees you, ready for college or career, which is another rebrand of Common Core, you have to meet the assessment. You can't meet the assessment if you don't have the curriculum.
Wow. So it seems to me, if we want to get out of this system, well, you really have to withdraw your consent in your child, or you become completely entrepreneurial and you pick something that you can run your own life and not be part of this ridiculous whole. It's not teaching anybody anything. I don't think it's teaching doctors anything at this point, since they're all social justice trained, can't do surgeries by themselves and don't feel comfortable without training wheels, and they're all algorithm driven. This has pervaded every single part of our society, unless you have a brain and you're able to use it to promote yourself and help others and create for yourself. And they're doing everything they can to try to, dissuade people from doing that.
Well, again, when you're trying to move millions and billions of people onto a blockchain, of course, this is the way you do it. You take away everything and you make the government the one. See, it's a government-created problem. It's also a public-private partnership problem. And look at who is offering you solutions.
The same people over and over again.
The same people, the same corporations.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, if people need to look at their, go back and read, because this is like Brave New World on all levels, isn't it? From being able to procreate, because that's being decimated. You're going to have a license practically in order to have a child, or the money to go through that fertility system. You've got kids who are being educated for certain slots. So you're almost born into a slot, depending on, do you ever get to move up in this system? Do you ever start from nothing and actually end up with something?
No, but that's the way it's supposed to be. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but there was a woman back in Reagan's administration, and she was at the Department of Education. Her name is Charlotte Iserby.
Yep, I have.
And she was the one who came on in an interview with myself and then my morning host on Sons of Liberty. And she was telling us, this slot system the way it works is, let's say that, your assessment said you're going to go be a welder. So your entire education is devoted to nothing but you learning welding. And you finally get to go see if you can get a job. Well, the quota system for welders cuts off at 10, and you're welder number 11.
What do you do?
You have no job, and that's all you've been trained for. So who will take care of you? The government will.
That doesn't sound like a very colorful life, where you're able to...
Does that...
No.
Yeah, does that sound like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness?
No.
This is why I'm saying that one particular section is so key, is such a powerful weapon. And if you got everyone in your community to be... I don't know if you ever saw the movie Shrek, but they were so ready, the town was so ready to tar and feather the ogre that they brought all these, torches with them, and they were just going to, do all kinds of harm to him. We need to be that upset. Okay. We really need to be that upset, but we don't need to act in anger. We need to use what's wrong, but use it in a proper way to express that we're not going to take it because we don't have to. And you're not going to do it because you shouldn't. This is all treason. And if we look back at how treason was supposed to be carried, punishment for treason was supposed to be carried out in this nation, we would need to go back to that. But, we have so many people, we can't kill anybody. We can't, hang anybody. BS. It's not something that I really want to see happen as I walk down the street. But if we have government officials who are being that bad, they need to have something happen to them so they understand, I can't do this anymore.
Well, there has to be consequences. But I think it has to be on the local level first, because trying to do this on a federal level is just, it's too big of a machine. But when people are looking at you across the table, and there was a school board meeting, I think it was in Georgia actually, where 400 people showed up and made their voices heard. They turned tail, the policy changed, no more masks for their children. But these are cowards, in my opinion, on top of it. They can do everything from an ivory tower where they're not looking in your face because they have absolute disdain for all of us. I don't care what color you are. It's us and them.
Absolutely. We need to start demanding that these meetings happen in a time where you can actually be there, because that's another way that the system is working against us. The notice might be a tiny advertisement in a newspaper that you don't ever get because, everybody's so online. That's the way that here in my county, they get around a lot of stuff. Or they plan the meeting for a key time that somebody may not be off work yet. Now, I know we can't have it so that, everybody can always be at every meeting. That's not my point. My point is, if the government would work with us so that we can be informed, it would be a whole different ballgame. And as far as local examples, there was a school board meeting recently in the state of New York, and the parents came out in number. And I don't even know what it was that they were speaking out against, Dr. Elena, but they started chanting whatever it was. And they chanted long enough and loud enough that they removed the entire school board because the school board could not take it.
That's what we got to do all across the board.
That's what we have to do.
That's the recipe. And in the few seconds that we have left, because the show ends way too quickly, and I can't wait to get you back on so we can have a part 2. How can people reach you and read what you do and listen to your blog?
Okay, commoncorediva.com. If you happen to want to come to Virginia Beach in late June, I will be a keynote speaker at the Conservative Teachers of America. It's going to be a conference that's held in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Well, people definitely need to go and do that, because I'm sure whatever you're going to say is going to be, earth-shattering and groundbreaking as usual. I just love having you on.
Well, thank you.
You're a real patriot.
You. And I want to encourage that it's not just teachers who need to come to this conference. It's taxpayers. It's parents, because that's who I'm gearing this all for, is all of the above, because it is every one of us who has something to lose in this particular instance, and that's our children.
And that's our future. And on that note, Lynne, thank you so much for coming on. I love having you on. I wish you Godspeed and a wonderful conference. And thank you, everybody, for living in the solution.
Revolutionary Talk for Revolutionary Times. Liberty Talk FM.